All right, yesterday, the Department of Homeland Security issued a terror alert stating that the U.S., quote, remains in a heightened threat environment, end quote, and that continued proliferation of false or misleading narratives regarding current events could reinforce existing personal grievances and ideologies, and combined with other factors could inspire individuals to mobilize to violence. Well, at the top of that list, those who are supposedly calling for violence are, quote, domestic violent extremists with grievances against the government's failure to secure the border, as well as advocates on both sides of the abortion debate. Now, last time I checked, there wasn't any pro-lifers going out and torching places. It was the pro-abortion crowd. Well, DHS also said it expects an increase in calls for violence as the U.S. enters midterm election season. But is it really violence and calls for violence that the Biden administration is concerned about? Joining me now to talk about this and more is U.S. Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma. He serves on 5 committees, including the Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs, and they just called votes, and so he's joining us by phone off the Senate floor. Senator, welcome back to the program.
Thanks. Glad to be with you again, Tony.
I'm going to get into this in a moment because lead on our new news site, Washington Stand, is your op-ed, Our Families Need Us. And that really is at the core of what we want to talk about. But I do want to get your take on the DHS terror alert. What do you make of this?
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable for them to be able to lay this out. What I've got to be able to dig in with them is what they have behind the scenes on it to be able to validate that. This reminds me of a year ago when Department of Justice said it was going to start investigating parents and tracking parents that come to school board meetings to be able to make sure that they're not domestic terrorists, actually. Instead of actually dealing with real threats out there, targeting parents at school board meetings or targeting individuals that are politically engaged is the antithesis. And if you want to talk about what the Constitution and the Bill of Rights protects, it is their right to have a redress of grievances with your government. Now, you and I, neither one of us would promote violence. We would have disdain for violence in trying to be able to get someone's attention on this. So this is not about anyone that wants to use violence to be able to have a political means. That is anathema to our American system of government. But we speak out on issues and shouldn't be restrained, and we shouldn't have anyone that is afraid to be able to speak out on political speech or as a parent speaking out at a school board meeting for fear of their own government putting them on a list.
Senator, what was absent in this alert is actually what we've seen happening over the last about 4 to 5 weeks, and that is over a dozen attacks on churches and pro-life resource centers or even family policy councils like we saw in Wisconsin. In fact, the latest just yesterday, a firebombing of a crisis pregnancy center in New York. Why is that not being addressed? I mean, we actually have church services being interrupted, which is a violation of federal law.
It is, actually, and to be able to see what happened also here in Washington, D.C., with a pro-life center that was actually vandalized, and then they spray-painted on the side of the building itself, revenge. So clearly there's a threat, and that individuals that are pro-life that are passionate about the value of every single child are clearly under threat from some individuals out there. And as we've seen even in the last 24 hours, when an individual has now been hit with attempted murder charges on Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh, we don't know all the background on that at this point, but we've clearly seen individuals that are unstable or individuals that are on the left also speaking out on some of these issues that have provided real threats for individuals that just want to be able to speak up for law and justice and the rights of a child.
Right. The president, after the shooting in Texas, the elementary school, which is tragic. I mean, every shooting is tragic. And we want to do something. The president said, in God's name, let's do something. Well, I think the first step would be to call on God's name. But in an op-ed a commentary that you've placed on the Washington Stand, you'd address this. What is this something? This something is going back to some of the elementary aspects of what made America a strong country. Tell us about it.
It is. The foundation of our nation's really around our families. When we have strong families, we have a strong nation. If we have weak families, we'll have a weak nation. For so many of these young men, and it has been young men over the past multiple decades now, committing different acts of violence, we find out they're very disconnected from other people. They have disjointed family situations, all those things. And I don't know this particular family, but we often find drug use, and we find a disjointed family. But we also find it just in our schools and our structure. There seems to be this desire of the left to say, let's take a vote and to be able to fix our culture. Our culture is not fixed by Washington, D.C. It's fixed by families and communities and churches that are actually engaging in the lives of individuals. But it is foundational with our families. If our family is where we learn work ethic, our family is where we learn staying off drugs, our families learn where we learn how to be able to serve other people, our families where we learn the value of honoring God and others. So all of those things come from a family. If the family doesn't actually pass that on, society struggles to be able to instill those values. So while some will charge up for more governments and more government programs, government rises as families collapse. And as a conservative, we'll often try to jump on the stack of government and push it down. But really what we need to do is get under families and to be able to lift them up. Anything we can do to strengthen families and parents and those moms and dads will help our nation as well.
Well, and I think what we see with government, every new government program and power that it masses for itself, it crowds out the family. It sends a message to parents. We see this in education. You're not needed. We got this. Stay away. If anything, we need parents back involved again. We will not solve what is ailing America. We will not find the solution without engaged parents and strong families. Because as you mentioned, when you look back, the last study I saw, 82% of these young men came from dysfunctional or broken families. That's tragic.
It is tragic. So again, I come back to the most basic thing. Individuals that can, at their church or through their community, their neighbors, can mentor young families, can help them in engaging with their kids, because we've got some 25-year-olds that are raising a child that literally they didn't see it growing up, and they need just help as well being able to engage. Because if they decide, I'm going to have children, but the government's going to raise them, we're in trouble as a culture. It's got to be parents are responsible for their children, and parents have got to step up into that lead, and we've got to continue to be able to challenge parents to take responsibility and engage, because the future of the country rides on how we're raising our kids.
You could not be more on target with that. Senator James Lankford, thanks so much for joining us, and thank you for writing that piece on Washington Stand.
Honored to be able to do it. Thanks, Tony, for your continuing work.